So what about the Ukrainian position? In the studio with me is the country's ambassador to Turkey, Vasyl Bodnar. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Your country has the full support of NATO, of the United States. There are some NATO troops moving around its eastern flanks. You have lethal assistance that has come from many countries. Is it going to be enough?
You know, it's never enough when you are witnessing the biggest harm in the world. So, when you see this aggressive build-up, what we should do first is to push on diplomacy. And we're doing it as best as we can. All these visits, all this network diplomacy, everything is stuck to the peaceful settlement of the conflict. And we are ready for that. You know, the president adopted a decision to have a direct conversation with Putin, whenever it will be with mediation or without mediation. But they didn't want to. That's the biggest problem. But what we need is not only to look at the situation, but also to make adequate efforts, including sanctions and other policies. And plus, we should be looking forward. What will happen if even this situation will be settled? Will Russia repeat it or not? So the final solution should be with some other direction, like NATO decision to accept Ukraine. That will be the answer for the whole security region situation.
So how frustrated is your government that NATO has not given a firm commitment to your country joining the military alliance? I mean, quite clearly, they have stood up to the Russian demand that Ukraine never be allowed to join NATO and said that, look, it's up to Ukraine, but they won't give a firm commitment that, yes, this should happen now. Zelensky wants it, the people want it.
So formally, we have a commitment because the decision of Bucharest summit said that Ukraine will be in NATO. So it's a commitment. Now it should be fulfilled. So what we need, we'll need a decision, which should be, for example, during the Madrid summit. Because otherwise, this crazy zone situation will continue to be, and the threatening to peace and security in Europe will continue. So that might be a decision finally, because we are not frustrated. We are working on that. We are working on integration to the NATO structures. We're working on the reforming of the armed forces, the democratization of the country, different reforms is being conducted. So we are being prepared for that. And the military forces are prepared the most. And even more, I would say that our army could lead NATO to some extent, because we are now the only country who is fighting physically with Russians. Why don't the other world is seeing that? So it's a added value. Plus, take into account our defense capabilities, our defense industry. So we could supply hugely to NATO capabilities to defend and to strengthen the collective defense in the region.
Yeah, it's quite clear that Kiev understands that the collective security will come through being a member of NATO, because Article 5 means that if a NATO member is attacked, then all of the other countries must come to the defense of that nation, member state that is attacked. These skirmishes that are happening in the east and this dramatic escalation over the past 24 hours, I mean, when you consider it along with the warning from the White House, from Western intelligence, that a false flag operation could be conducted by Russia as an excuse for some kind of incursion, are you worried about what's happening in the east right now? Or
Yes.
do you see it as a continuation of what started in 2014?
Exactly. It's one of the versions of the continuation of the aggression. So because we have been in the war for the last 8 years, and these 8 years, the people around the world globe just watching. Now the world is in solidarity with Ukraine. We get enormous support from the political side, from the media, and from in practical terms. So we are receiving a number of lethal weapons, we are receiving a number of practices, and that's helped us to deter this aggression. Plus, this information was spread out by the Western intelligence. It also had a target to prevent Russians from attacking. It could be also one of the things, because according to our estimations, they are not ready for the tomorrow attack. I mean, large-scale attack on Ukraine, as it was said, but an invasion. But they could continue provocations like they are doing last 24 hours in the eastern part of the border, and because it's continuation of the hybrid war.
Yes.
It's not the real war which we have been expecting from the media, but it is a war which is real and could be continued. That's the biggest threat, because they could first, for example, try to recognize these so-called republics, our territories which are occupied, and then start to supply them officially weapons and military equipment or troops. And we are there trying to continue advancement, saying that it's not ours, it's theirs.
Yeah, you see, so here could be, do you think, a possible diplomatic resolution? Is there anything in the mind of the Ukrainian government that Luhansk and Donetsk, in that Donbass region, that those areas should be given some kind of autonomy which might lead to at least a Russian withdrawal and a Russian understanding that we at least have that part of a country which we consider anyway to be part of Russia, which clearly that's a very particular view from Moscow, but we all understand the relationship that Russia has with that eastern part of your country.
But look, formally, we have adopted a law which gives them some kind of specific self-governing already. And this law is postponed every year and continues, so it's in force. But it says nothing to Russians, because they would like us to talk directly to them, to those occupied territories.
To the separatists, which Zelensky says will never happen.
But it's not the separatists, it's the guys who was appointed by Russians, who was, let's say, supplied by Russians. They receive Russian passports, they receive Russian money, Russian military equipment. So it's appointed. So the Russia is the side of the conflict. That's the biggest problem which Russia tries to avoid. So we have a trilateral contact group. And there is OSCE, which is mediator in two sides of the conflict, Ukraine and Russia.
How interesting, because Russia says it doesn't want to have anything to do with the OSCE.
Yes, but
so it's already taking that out of the equation.
Why TCG is composed of three, and Russia is part? Why Normandy format is Russia, Ukraine, and two mediators?
Germany and France?
There is no occupied territories. Even if you look at the signatures done by the Minsk agreements, they're only surnames. They do not represent anything. They're just invited persons. Even in the TCG, they're invited part, and they're playing mostly on the Russian role. So that means that we should establish a conflict or settle the conflict with Russia, because Russia initiated, Russia occupied 7% of our territory, and continue to possess an aggression against us. So it's their forces concentrated on our borders, not ours.
But do you see the Donbass as the key to a resolution?
Yes, exactly, because Minsk format is concentrated on the Donbass settlement. They wouldn't like to talk about Crimea. But we have started this initiative of the Crimea platform, which is also a peaceful method of attracting attention, plus bringing Russia to the negotiating table, because they've stolen our territory and didn't like to discuss it. That's not correct, according to even international law, basic one. They broke down all the international agreements we have bilaterally. They broke down the international law as it is, and they also continue to use the threat of force against us. So it's also, what is UN doing?
Yeah.
For what it's created. So look, it's still the issue.
Sorry, we know that the UN Security Council with Russia in a permanent seat there and China with a permanent seat, it won't do anything.
We need to reform it. We need to do something which will be more practical and will bring results. Because half of the year, the world is looking at Ukraine and just, what to do? Let's do something in practical terms. Let's bring peacekeepers. Let's bring, I don't know, mediators, etc. Some countries are doing that. This shuttle diplomacy or network diplomacy is working. And our strong positions also work because we are subject, not the object. All the things, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So we know everything which was in discussions between, for example, some parties and Russia. And this network diplomacy worked pretty good because either we arranged agreed the position before, or we are receiving the outcomes and also saying, no, we did not agree on that. For example, Macron brings the idea of Finlandization of Ukraine. That's a stupid idea. We have been invaded in 2014 when we were a non-aligned country. We have nothing to do with NATO, with the EU, even at that period of time, but we were invaded. So if Russia would like to continue this, we will still continue to be a potential victim of their aggression, because they would have a temptation. Okay, Ukraine is weak, etc. Ukraine is strong, and Ukraine could lead. And now, recently, we have seen the idea of creating these local alliances. Poland, Great Britain, and Ukraine. Before that, we have Lublin Triangle. So we are now moving to NATO part by part.
Yeah.
If we couldn't be accepted immediately as a full-fledged member, we are creating small alliances. And we already received some weapons from Great Britain. The British advisors are helping us. Polish guys are supporting, Americans, others. We are working closely with Turkish side. So, you know, we are constructing a dialogue with bilateral level and strengthening ourselves, plus strengthening other partners and giving them a lead. That's the biggest important thing.
And presumably, Ukraine understands that this is going to be a long game, because we're not just talking about a possible military confrontation. We're not just talking about continuing diplomacy. We're talking about the cyber attacks that have been happening, especially increasing over the past month or so. I mean, we're talking about a propaganda campaign that is coming from Moscow, disinformation. We're talking about Russian passports being given to people who are Ukrainian nationals but living in the east of your country. This is not something necessarily that looks like it's going to be resolved quickly.
Exactly. So it's a long-lasting conflict because Russia, the aim of Russia is to turn back control over Ukraine. We wouldn't like to be under control of Russia, so we would like to be free and democratic country. And that is why the difference, when Putin say we are one nation, one people, it's not true. We're completely different. So we are developing democracy, and they are stuck in this autocracy, and it is not changing. So forever Putin, we are changing authorities every 5 years or 4 years. So the changes in reforms, etc., etc. So it poses a civilization threat for them, because they see a good example that some post-Soviet republic could develop to a normal Central European democratic country without their subordination and control. That is the biggest threat. So that's why it's essential for us to be within the NATO and EU structures and to protect ourselves at least politically. If we would have NATO political shield, for example, it will lead not to the aggression but to the stabilization of the situation. Russia has NATO members on this border, but it's never complained about Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But they are saying something that, okay, most probably NATO will deploy missiles in Ukraine. For what? We are defending ourselves. We are not asking for troops from NATO. We are not asking for anything. We are ready to defend. And if the countries understand the value of Ukrainian resistance to Russia, it is pretty good for the stability of Europe.
Ambassador Vasyl Bodnar, thank you so much indeed for coming in to give us, the sort of first-hand account of how your government is dealing with this situation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.